What is going on, everybody? And welcome to a brand new segment on the channel called Your Requests. This is going to be the segment on my channel where I take your requests for movies and watch them and review them. And I'm really excited to do this because I recently did a Q&A video and I had so many incredible questions, and I really appreciate each and every one of you that took time to think out a really great question and put it out there for me. I had a ton of fun doing that. It was a really enjoyable experience, and I feel like, it gave me an opportunity to be able to kind of talk directly to you guys, which I always think is a lot of fun. And it seemed to be one of the biggest requests in that video for me to do requests from you guys to watch movies that you want me to see. And so I'm all for that. And if you have a movie that you'd like for me to watch, feel free to leave it down in the comments because I'm really excited to do more of that. And this first request that I got just so happens to coincide with another segment on my channel I do called Nate's Favorites. Yes, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. I have not seen it in years. It's probably been 6 or 7 years since my last revisit, but in high school and early college, I used to watch this movie, at least once a year, if not 2 or 3 times a year. It's a very special movie to me, and I feel like every single time that I revisit it, I get something new out of it. And so this is a great excuse for me to be able to come out and talk about a movie that I love a lot. And the film that I'm going to be discussing with you today is Donnie Darko. Donnie Darko is directed by Richard Kelly. After narrowly escaping a bizarre accident, a troubled teenager is plagued by visions of a large bunny rabbit that manipulates him to commit a series of crimes. So, like I said, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. This is a movie that I think about quite frequently, and revisiting it this time around, my appreciation for it grew even more. This movie is really special for one specific reason, and I love movies like this, and I talk all the time about how much I love art house filmmaking, directors like David Lynch and Charlie Kaufman. And one of the things I like so much about Donnie Darko is you can watch this movie from start to finish, not unpack anything as far as like the subtext or any of the messaging that the director is trying to get across, and you can just enjoy it as a movie. Like from start to finish, you can just enjoy the wild, surreal, abstract experience, the really phenomenal performances, and just finish the film and say, wow, that was an experience. Or you can do like me, and every single time you watch this movie, pull something completely and totally new out of it and really kind of unpack a lot of the incredible subject matter that Richard Kelly is trying to get across here, because I think this movie does a really phenomenal job of just kind of examining our society as a whole in one movie, and it tackles a ton of subject matter, and I'm really excited to cover a little bit of it for you today in this review. So at the beginning of the film, we're introduced to Donnie Darko, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, and he wakes up on the side of the road. He apparently does this often, where he leaves his house in the middle of the night, falls asleep outside, and walks back home. And we go back to his house, where we are introduced to his family. His dad's kind of an average, normal dad, always like in his own world, pays attention to his family sort of, but kind of like his own interests are number one. Mom seems to be a lot more of the caring parent who loves her kids, still kind of gets into it with them like a normal mom, but you can tell there's a genuine love and care for her children. And then Donnie has 2 sisters. He has an older sister played by his real life sister, Maggie Gyllenhaal, who is about to go off to college. She just finished high school. And then he has a younger sister, and they all live about their day-to-day lives. We see Donnie go to school, and he's incredibly intelligent. He's one of the smartest people in his school, and he's constantly questioning his teachers and having thoughtful discussions despite still being a kid. And one day, a plane engine falls out of the sky and crashes into his bedroom at his house. But luckily, he was not in the bedroom, so no one is hurt. They just have to call a company to rebuild that part of the house. And shortly after that happens, Donnie starts seeing visions of someone dressed in a bunny rabbit costume who refers to themselves as Frank. And Frank tells Donnie that the end of the world is coming in this very specific amount of time. And as days progress, things get simultaneously weirder, and Frank starts telling Donnie to do things, and specifically commit crimes. And throughout the film, Donnie meets Gretchen, played by Jena Malone. The two of them start to form a relationship. He has these thoughtful discussions with his teacher, and all the while, he is just trying to figure out who Frank is, and is the world actually going to end in this specific amount of time. So like I said, this movie, in my personal opinion, is a masterpiece. And I know this movie is very highly regarded, and I think it's very, very much worthwhile. For starters, I love all of the performances in this movie. What I really like is some of the characters feel like portraits of exaggerations of small town America. And as someone who grew up in multiple small towns, who moved around a lot, there's so many moments in this movie that feel incredibly reflective of what life in those situations was like, and just feeling like an outcast in those situations. I was someone who I always was big into art. I loved music. I loved movies. I loved theater. And I grew up in a very small conservative community and moved around into small conservative communities. And so people didn't always get me. And so, like Donnie Darko's character, I could feel that struggle of never feeling like you're going to belong, and that loneliness. And I think Jake Gyllenhaal does a really great job bringing that character to life. I also really like Jena Malone's performance in this. I think that their chemistry together is really excellent. Drew Barrymore, for the screen time that she has in this, is phenomenal. I really like her character a lot and what she represents. Patrick Swayze, I always, for some reason, whenever I rewatch this movie, I always forget that he's in it, and then I'm like, oh yeah, why did I forget that? But his character, he plays the perfect sleazeball. Like, it's just really interesting to see him in that role, and he does a really fantastic job. And every actor and actress in this movie just brings it their all. And like I said, I really like that so many of them feel like caricatures of small town America. At times, it's kind of reflective of like some of John Waters' work, like Polyester, where he just takes these characters in these suburban communities and just inflates them to 100 to really get his point across. And I think this is one of those situations where there's enough authentic human emotion kind of contrasted with the really absurdist elements and like the extreme personalities of people in this community to make it balanced. Like, it wouldn't necessarily always work, but I think what's pulled off here works well. I love this movie visually, despite some of the effects feeling incredibly dated. I think it works. It's visually haunting. There are a lot of really amazing shots and editing transition. It almost feels like you're watching a dream, which I think works really well for this movie and what it's trying to accomplish. Getting the audience to kind of immerse themselves in this world in this almost 2 hour long movie. It's just really hypnotizing. If that's the perfect word to describe this movie, is hypnotizing. It really does just kind of allure you in, and once you settle into the movie, you just don't want to leave. It's one of those things that every time I finish it, I just want to restart it immediately. And it's just an absolutely brilliantly shot film. As far as music goes, one of the best soundtracks to a movie of all time, not just like all of the popular music that is utilized from the time period, but also the score and the sound design really just help move the movie along perfectly. And my favorite part about this movie is it discusses a wide array of themes, and it would be difficult for me to describe all of them to you if I didn't make like a 45-minute video. But just to cover some of them, what I really like about Donnie's character is Donnie is dealing with extreme depression. He feels completely and utterly alone in his day-to-day existence. And the way that it is portrayed in this movie, the constant yearning and desperation to just feel like you belong, is something that anyone can really relate to. And I think it's done in such a brilliantly authentic way. And these meetings with his therapist and them discussing, like, obviously Frank and everything that's going on with the rabbit that he's seeing, and this obsession that he gets with time travel, and is this someone time traveling to communicate with him? It all just comes back to him wanting to feel some kind of connection and wanting to feel some level of understanding. And there's a brilliant scene in this movie that moves me to tears every time I watch it, where Donnie's sitting on his bed with his mom, and he looks at his mom and says, "How does it feel to have a wacko for a son?" And she says, "It feels wonderful." And in that moment, it's such a beautiful, showcase of there's this woman who has raised a child who doesn't necessarily understand her kid to the purest extent, and they don't always get along, but she genuinely wants him to have a happy life and is trying her best, and he's attempting to move his life forward. And I think there aren't enough dynamics between parents and children like that in this world, where parents are willing to go out of their way to understand their children's mental health. And that's something in this movie that always really moves me, is the portrayal of mental health and those types of things. I also really like a lot of these snapshots of like these of small town America. The teacher who is hyper conservative, who constantly falls back into like criticizing intellect and intelligence, and whenever there's rationale or reason to questioning her thoughts behind things, she immediately fights back because she's in such a groupthink mentality. She's unaware and unwilling to kind of step out of that to learn from someone else's perspective, even to the point of defending someone who has been in possession of child pornography. Like it's really reflective of a lot of the conservative ideology in America now. And just watching it this time around, it felt even more prevalent just watching it, and just like the blind idiocy from conservatism towards so much in society, and the unwillingness for empathy. And I really like the way that it's portrayed in this movie. I think it's very brilliant. I love Drew Barrymore's character, and having this teacher who is trying to teach these children in a very authentic and realistic way, to where she's being challenged about the material that she's presenting to the kids and about certain themes and discussions of topics that she's having, to the point where they start questioning whether or not she should have a job. And I think that's also really reflective of our current society, when you look at school boards banning books and people not wanting certain things to be talked about. I live in the state of Ohio, and they're trying to get legislation passed in Ohio right now where librarians could get criminal convictions and felonies for recommending books that the government and people in Ohio deem obscene. Well, what do you deem obscene? Do you just think books about queer kids are obscene? Like, this is just censorship in the most outright form. And what the issue is going to be is kids are never going to learn. If you're just indoctrined into one life and you don't have the freedom to be able to read and educate and learn, you're just going to live in a very specific bubble. And I think that's the issue in the United States of America, where I live specifically, is that people only want to learn one thing. They only want to learn what the people in their communities learn, and they shut themselves off from so much of the world. And I love that Drew Barrymore's character tries to fight through that the entire movie, to do what is in her best interest and to teach these kids in the way that they can learn and expand their minds. And I think that that's something incredibly prevalent, not only in just that, but the way that she showcases empathy to certain kids in the school and wants them to thrive and succeed. And I love that part of the movie as well. And there's a lot in this about sacrifice for others too, which I really can appreciate a lot, and how sometimes in life people have to make sacrifices, and also sometimes life just delivers really terrible blows to even the best people. Like, that's what I like about this movie, is the greatest people in the world sometimes go through some of the worst things imaginable, because that's just how life works. And I think this movie, it's trying to give a somewhat idealized version of Donnie's life, where like he does these things and life gets somewhat better for people, but it's still not a perfect world, because a perfect world is incapable of existing because of all of the flaws and issues that arise in the world we live in. And I love that about this movie. I think it takes all of that subject matter that I just discussed and kind of ties it up in a beautiful bow and hits you like a gut punch at the end of the movie. And I loved this movie so much. It made me cry quite a bit this time around. Just something about the relevancy of all of it just really stuck with me hard. And it's a film that I'll never stop thinking about. And if you've never seen Donnie Darko before, please watch it. It is one of the most brilliant films ever made, and it's a movie that I will never stop thinking about. So have you seen Donnie Darko? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I think this movie is brilliant. I love it a lot, and I always look forward to rewatching it. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more content out for you in the near future, like this video. If you'd like to leave me a request, put a comment down below and I will add you to my rotating list of your recommendations for movies you'd like me to watch. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.